Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland Anime review. This one's going to be for episode 4, and this was definitely the best episode since the first one. I did think that episode 2 and 3 were kind of noticeably not as good as the first episode, and they sort of covered material that, with some of the changes in the adaptation, didn't come across the best. They were still good, and the anime overall is doing a good job. But I felt like this episode, even though it still has those kind of adaptation quirks of, not covering every single scene, potentially mixing around when certain scenes are placed, it worked really well here because they were dealing with, I think, kind of more important material. In that, what I liked with this episode was the setup from like first scene to last scene and then scenes in the middle. It was basically, in a way, all about, trying to figure out who the traitor is, and Norman basically figuring it out. That you kind of realize when you look back on the episode, like that the very first scene of the episode is Norman placing the rope under his bed, and then obviously the end is him using that fact basically to figure out that it was Ray who is the traitor. And then the entire like core of the episode, apart from those few Norman scenes, is trying to figure out who the traitor is, with the focus on Gilda primarily, but then they sort of, draw your attention to Dawn by the end. And then the really awesome twist that it's actually Ray. That's one of the, three main characters of the show. He's actually the traitor. And it makes sense as well that you sort of realize, with some of the stuff that Norman says a little later on about why they lied to Gilda and Dawn about the exact specifics of what the house is and the truth about everything. They didn't tell them about the demons as such. They didn't tell them that, their siblings who leave are killed. They just kind of told them human trafficking, there's still a chance, we have to do all of this to save them. And Ray is actually the one to question with Norman. Why would you do that? Why would you lie to them about that? And then Ray ends up getting found out by Norman being just as, I suppose, ruthless in a way. He knows for a fact that the only people who can't be the traitor are himself and Emma. As much as they're close to Ray, he didn't go with them to see Connie, what happened to her. He didn't technically, find out the truth along with them. They told him afterwards. So he is still had the potential to be the traitor, and you thought he was kind of going under the radar because he was so involved. He was the first person they told. He was directly getting involved in other parts of the escape. Like, he's directly coming up with certain parts of it, like to train everyone using tag, which we also saw in this episode, of forming the teams as a way to kind of build up the strength of all the other, people at the house who maybe aren't as good as, the top people. So, in that sense, I thought the main kind of twist of this episode was executed really, really well, because leaving on just the sudden twist of, like, you think, oh, wow, so it's confirmed, Dawn is the traitor. And then Norman just turns it around and it's like, no, you were the traitor. And you sort of realize then that, wait, yeah, you get the scene that Norman told Ray, okay, I told Gilda the rope was here. I told Dawn the rope was here. And the only person Norman told that to was Ray. We never actually saw Norman tell Ray or tell Dawn or Gilda either of those things. So it's this extra layer of the trap that he kind of played. And obviously, I suppose, it's not really much of a spoiler, but obviously, I assume the next episode, at least based on the manga, is going to be an explanation of all of this stuff. So, it's not like this is suddenly going to, like, just never get talked about again. Like, we'll get the explanation coming up next about specifically what happened, but just up to this point, really great cliffhanger, and I'm glad they didn't try to rush in the explanation here and then. They're just, here's the key big twist so far in the series. Ray, the third main character, he's actually working with Mom. And especially given that they also sort of led you astray a bit with the whole idea of the note being slipped under Mom's door, and you think it's Gilda, but then they sort of immediately cut away from that because Gilda's actually going to Crone. Then you're like, oh wait, so it's Dawn who slipped the note under the door, and then suddenly you realize that Ray was the one who slipped under the door as well. So a lot of bits and pieces coming together here in a really nice way, I thought, over the course of the episode. I suppose as for the scene where they did tell Dawn and Gilda, they focused a little bit more on, I suppose, Emma and Gilda's relationship, that they're actually quite close. But since the reveal happened, Emma's been a bit distant from everyone except basically Ray and Norman, and I suppose Gilda is like the main friend of hers who's sort of suffered for that because she saw how Emma's been so different and distant from her. And in a way, as much as this is a terrible thing that they found out, she's glad just so she can be closer to Emma again. And it's especially what they did then with the Crone scene of Crone basically trying to act on her own to get Gilda on her side as her spy to sort of counter what clearly Isabella is doing. I like all these kind of pieces kind of moving together now, that the build-up from maybe 2 and 3 being slightly weaker episodes makes this episode very strong when all of a sudden it all comes together. We have Mom, all she wants is Crone to be an extra eyes and ears, basically security, an extra kind of body in there. And she's basically saying that, look, if you just, don't act up, don't do anything crazy, I will basically put in a recommendation and more or less guarantee that you get promoted to the position of Mom. And that should be, all she wants, but Crone is now suddenly obsessed with sort of bringing down Isabella, I suppose, for being sort of arrogant to her. That in a way, Crone sort of wants to take over this specific, facility. And she tries to do that by getting Gilda on her side, and Isabella directly says to her, stop trying to figure out who knows. You don't need to know. Just, I need you to basically act as security. But she then begins to try and figure that out. So, she's suddenly this wild card in all of this as well, in that she also knows this, like the idea that, a couple of them that did this, and like Isabella, she basically knows the details. And especially now with the Ray reveal, that means Mom actually knows for sure who knows. So that's a really kind of big reveal, and I assume she's keeping that from Crone, and Crone is being asked to basically figure out by herself, information that she doesn't have, and what's she going to do? How far is Crone going to go to, kind of take out Mom? Is she willing to risk an escape and maybe assisting them in an escape to make all of this happen? Because obviously Isabella's the one in charge, Crone is just there, so if something bad did happen, Isabella would be the one to take the kind of heat for that. So, that's the other factor in all of this that's important to keep in mind. And then, I suppose beyond that, you had the whole, the little talk of scores and them sort of figuring out that, okay, all of them together, pretty much Gilda, Dawn, Ray, Norman, Emma, together figuring out, okay, here's the scores, and this is basically how it works. They kind of start from young, going up to older, and then depending on the scores, they sort of, ship people out in that way. That's why Connie was shipped out when she was. They also kind of roughly pointed out that Phil is kind of becoming a slightly more important character, in that he stays around Emma a lot. There was a minor bit of suspicion there that Ray was basically telling her, like, given what you know and what's going on here, we're trying to figure out who the traitor is. He sticks around you a lot. Shouldn't you suspect him? And just kind of asking her to, remember that, basically. So I think that's an important kind of little thing of just, she's sort of, there's definitely a certain level of naivete to Emma, and just the idea of she wants to take everyone, regardless of, if they've done anything or not, with them when they escape. And she's suddenly kind of learning all these sort of harsher lessons, that there's more to it than sort of like kind of blind optimism, but she's still kind of staying strong through all of that. So we'll see how exactly that plays out. And then I think the only other big reveal from this is that Norman says that they are going to basically go through with the escape in 10 days, and this sort of shocks everyone because they all thought they'd have much more time to prepare, but Norman wants to do it as soon as possible, basically. As soon as Ray figures out how to destroy the kind of chips, they should just go for it. And And obviously, like, given what happens at the end of the episode, the traitor reveal, it was partly to put pressure on Rey to maybe kind of act suddenly, not think things through, given that, wait, the escape is coming up much quicker than I expected, and we'll see what happens from here. But I think that's most of what I want to say about this episode. Definitely I think, much better episode than the last two, much more on par with episode 1, and I think going forward we're now in a kind of spot where there's a lot going on now. There's so much kind of going on with just the interactions between characters. Plot twists are ready to get going now that the first big one is out of the way, because suddenly Rey actually becomes a much more interesting character now because of the fact that he is the traitor, and then because he's involved in the escape. So we'll have to wait and see him explain himself here and see just the significance of it, or I suppose him being the traitor. Does it mean what we think it means, and sort of that sort of thing. So, you know, they're important questions to ask, and not just immediately assume that he is just as bad as kind of Mom and all of this. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.